Ever since the 90s in the West, and long before that in the East, magical girls have been one of the staples of anime.
Usually as a gateway, telling simple but heartfelt and emotional stories that can hook young audiences early and pull them into the hobby faster than you can shout Moon Tiara Boomerang.
But in the age of streaming, that's not so much the case anymore. Part of that is because people in the West who get into anime tend to be a bit older, especially as massive crossover successes like Attack on Titan and Kimetsu no Yaiba have shattered that cultural barrier, introducing a broader Western audience to anime at more advanced ages, who weren't really looking for bright, campy stories, even outside of the magical girl genre.
And part of it is because of that era we were in for a while, where it felt like every time we saw a magical girl, it was to torture them as much as possible.
We'll call that the Madoka Magica effect. The problem is that most of these Madoka knockoffs were just that, knockoffs. They were riding the coattails of Madoka Magica, which exploded onto the scene with, let's be honest, the shock factor of its graphic violence and brutal story.
And while there were some gems to come from that era, like my precious Yuki Yuna, the fad died out pretty quick. Audiences just outgrew it, or at least outgrew the desire for every new magical girl project to be that way.
And when people grow up, they have a tendency to seek out stories that are more mature. Stories that, while fantastical, speak to the things they might be going through in their adult lives.
And really, what better genre to tell stories like that than magical girls, right? I mean, we all know the whole premise of the classic transforming superheroine is a metaphor for young girls blossoming into young women. So, naturally, the next stage of that would probably look a lot like
Kabushiki Gaisha Magilumiere, better known as
Magilumiere, Magical Girls Incorporated.
Yeah, it's not the most fascinating thing out there. It doesn't thrive on the intense emotion of a lot of its contemporaries, or hell, even bombastic action like many of its Shonen Jump peers. But it does do some interesting stuff with the magical girl premise.
It shifts the focus of the story to a developmental stage that an older audience can identify with, and it starts with the story's approach to what a magical girl even is.
So grab a broom and a staff ID, because we're gonna cast a spell breaking down Magilumiere's systemization of magical girls.
So, I don't know that I'd necessarily call it a trend, because all the examples that come to mind are pretty specific, but I've noticed this pattern in more recent years, where it seems like a lot of the typical power fantasy archetypes are being reimagined as commonplace.
It's a process I'm just gonna label mundanification. The most obvious modern examples of this that I can think of are what My Hero Academia and One Punch Man did with superheroes, integrating them into everyday life in a way that the big two don't really do, outside of a few specific titles here and there.
In those, being a hero is basically a day job, sort of like being a firefighter or a cop. And despite both doing this with superheroes, the worlds they've set up are so different that there's not as much overlap as you might think.
Either way, the escapist power fantasy role of superhero becomes grounded through its systemized integration into everyday life. The role is overseen by companies and government organizations, exposing the entire archetype to corporatization or bureaucratization.
Business and politics. She means business and politics.
Oi, I don't need a translator.
Don't need a word of the day app either, and yet here we are.
Look here, you smartass little—
See? You know I'm smart without the big words.
What?
So, as we were saying, the point is that just like My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, and others, Magilumiere takes the magical girl premise and grounds it in an ordinary society. In fact, I'd argue that it's actually even more grounded than the others. Right, sis?
Yes. The hero systems in My Hero Academia and One Punch Man, among others, are still treated as relatively larger than life. Heroes are a massive cultural phenomenon that pretty much suck up all the oxygen in the room. It's to the point that the world mostly revolves around them.
Not so much the case for Magilumiere's magical girls. Here, it really is just another job. A cool and important one that draws a lot of attention, sure, but still a regular old 9 to 5. And yeah, you can get famous from doing it, but it's more like becoming an influencer who happens to be a magical girl, or becoming an influencer may be part of your job as a magical girl, depending on the company you work for.
Approaching the system in this way, while less exciting, helps make the story feel more accessible, which is all you really want out of a workplace comedy like this. Even one about magical girls.
And that accessibility makes it perfect for telling the types of stories that Magilumiere is aspiring to tell.
Ordinarily, the classical magical girl series, like the one Magilumiere is homaging, is this coming-of-age tale. The main character starts off as a pubescent, or even pre-pubescent girl who discovers her magical powers and rapidly starts to grow up as new challenges come her way.
Along the way, they learn all about the power of love and cooperation, all while facing down monsters that represent or outright embody trials of stepping into the world of womanhood.
But Magilumiere doesn't do that. Instead, it slides the timescale down the line and begins with Kana, a bright-eyed college grad going through the slog of job hunting.
And I don't care who you are or what country you're in, job hunting sucks.
Amen.
That late start for this series and the decision to make the magical girl gig an actual job does come with its benefits, though. Namely, it broadens the type of stories you can tell.
At this particular stage of Kana's life, she's already a young adult, trying to make it in the workforce. She's trying to become more capable, reliable, and independent. And that's decidedly not a coming-of-age story. It's a start of maturity story.
Right. It's not like you stop growing once you're of age, and you definitely won't learn everything you'll need to navigate through life by your early 20s.
Hell, what do we know? We're still just 18. Somehow.
Eh?
Nothing. So, by being a story about a young adult trying to settle into adult roles, you're naturally able to explore some more mature subjects. And by mature, we don't mean unnecessarily dark. We just mean stories about adult problems and adult social dynamics.
And you can still have a lot of the same storytelling devices. Instead of parents or teachers to act as your mentors or guides through life, you get bosses and senior coworkers, people who are more experienced at maneuvering through the adult world.
Kana is a new hire, so she spends a good amount of the story following her boss, Shigemoto's guidance, and she often leans on Koshigaya's support in the field. She's literally surrounded by people with more experience than her who can help her grow into her role and inform or co-sign her decisions.
Of course, this is still a baseline Shonen Jump series, so you know the characters are going to be quirky and over the top in ways that are designed to appeal to that actual target demographic, which is teenage boys. But the point still stands.
It's not like adults can't identify with stories about younger characters growing up. Everyone was a kid at some point. But sliding that timescale gives you the opportunity to tell stories that speak to where those young adults are now. And that's not for nothing.
Magilumiere's greatest strength in its approach is its relatability. Not that being relatable is the end-all be-all. I have almost nothing in common with most of my favorite characters, but it does go a long way towards making it easy for an audience to get attached.
Probably the most consistent example ever of a character in a fantastical tale being made relatable is Spider-Man. Dude can lift a car over his head, dodge bullets, and stick to walls, but he still had to worry about high school drama, getting his education, rent, bills, his aunt's health, dating, marriage, a toxic workplace, and the list goes on.
Admittedly, it did kind of get to the point of self-parody with him, to the point where the guy's life is such a mess that it becomes kind of funny. And then a little tiresome.
That's the old Parker luck for ya.
Sure, luck has nothing to do with the writing at all.
Anyway, Magilumiere obviously doesn't go to the extent to making the story into struggle porn, but it does take Kana through some very relatable hurdles. Her job hunt is the obvious start of that. Fresh out of school, trying to get a job, and continually striking out because of what feels like increasingly arbitrary hiring practices. It compounds with the frustration of doing everything you're taught to do to prepare for the workforce, only for that workforce to reject you.
After that, you have her rushed training, her first day on the job, her continuing to learn about the job in the field, the collaboration and competition with the other magical girl companies.
All while she's grappling with the responsibilities that come with her new job.
It's sort of reinforced by the antagonistic forces of the story as well. Yeah, her job is to fight Kai, but at least initially, they're basically just like natural disasters. And she's a first responder. They aren't meant to be metaphors for anything. They're just a threat.
Yep. Most of the friction in the series comes from rival magical girl companies with entirely different objectives and values. Companies that have been around longer, are more established, have good PR, and basically found an infinite money glitch with unending resources at their disposal.
In other words, companies that basically threaten to run hers out of business before it can even think about growing.
There's also the drama that comes from trying to help the company grow, even independent of the competition. Needing to be mindful of civilians and their property, managing crowds to prevent panic, etc.
Even the magic isn't actually magic. It's technology. And in this grounded story, where the whole premise of a magical girl is brought down to reality, I think that really works. Magic just becomes a tool of the job in that case.
It's all stuff that the story does to build its world without making Kana the center of some grand destiny or cosmic cycle, where she's thrown into battle against ancient evils or calamities of unearthly proportions. There's nothing mythical about it.
And because of that, she gets to just be Kana.
At the end of the day, Magilumiere is probably not gonna set your world on fire.
After all, part of the benefit of the traditional magical girl format is that since those stories are introduced to us at such a young age, they can become defining formative experiences. Things that really stick with us on a profound level.
But that doesn't diminish the value of stories like this one, which reimagine the premise into something accessible to an audience that might have moved on from all the camp, or at least want more types of stories than just the ones that the classical style tends to offer.
By systemizing the premise of a magical girl, Magilumiere can build a whole believable world, and it can tell stories based on how that world works, without every week making it feel like that world is about to end.
And we get to experience that world through the eyes of someone who's pretty freshly introduced into it. Not because she's a chosen heroine or the reincarnation of some ancient benevolent force, but because she's a smart girl who landed an unconventional job.
The things she actually struggles with or against aren't actually the Kai. They're very real, very human, very adult things. Things that are more abstract than any monster.
It doesn't have to have the lore of a Sailor Moon or the action of a Nanoha.
It just has to stick to that down-to-earth story it's trying to tell.
That is the magic of Magilumiere.
But what do you think? Did you read the manga? Or are you watching the anime? Either way, let us know down below.
Like the video because it helps out. Subscribe and ring the bell because it helps even more. And don't forget about the official Geek Machine Patreon page. Links in the description.
This has been Bulletune. That's my sister Riley.
She's my sister Rila.
Thanks for watching.
Keep up the awesome and
Stay tuned!